Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Ilyas, and I'm one of the people involved in the Teutonic project, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to our Teutonic talk.
Good morning,
And
everyone.
essentially,
My name is
the
Ilyas,
the
and
point
I'm one
of
the
these talks
people involved in
over the
Teutonic
last couple of
project, and it
weeks
gives me great pleasure.
is because Teutonic believes in holistic education. You'll know that Teutonic is a maths organization primarily. We provide support to high school students, online support, but we also believe in providing holistic education. And this has come in the form of talks on anxiety, which happened 2 weeks ago, and then last week a talk on long-term learning and memorization. And and on this side, today we're having a talk on time management. And we are very blessed to have with us Jamaaludeen Khan. So I'm just going to read a short bio of Mr. Khan. Mr. Khan is an internationally acclaimed thought leader, professional speaker, and leadership coach. For the past 20 years, he has worked with youth, entrepreneurs, international corporations, as well as not-for-profit organizations globally. He's a recognized authority at the nexus of psychology and business. He is also an avid student of the Islamic sciences. He has studied with various Islamic disciplines with teachers from South Africa and abroad. And his key passion is identifying and teaching where Islam and science intersect. He has clients in 11 countries and is featured regularly in global media. So just to give you an idea of how the talk is going to run, it should be about 90 minutes in total, might be longer, might be shorter. But the idea is to have an hour-long talk um, and followed by a Q&A session. However, you are welcome to ask questions throughout the talk, and they may be addressed during the talk, but the idea is we set aside those last 30 minutes for engagement. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Mr. Khan.
Ilyas, thank you for that introduction. Good morning and welcome to everyone who has joined our session today. I do have some theory to share, but I would like this session to be as interactive as possible. So like Ilyas has said, if you do have questions while I'm presenting, please send that through on the chat. But also we can, focus questions at the Q&A session at the end. So time management. Time management is something that people struggle with throughout their lives. So I believe we have some high school students, some university students, and also possibly some professionals. No matter where you are in your life, whatever stage you are in, people find that they have difficulty managing their time. So this presentation and the tools that I will share with you today will help you to be better at running your day. It's very, very important to control our day rather than letting the day control us. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I have the wrong presentation shared. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry, folks. I need to get the right presentation into the Zoom. Okay, there we go. Okay, I do apologize for that. I've been having a number of tech issues this morning. But if you are a fan of the Big Bang Theory, you would have come across the name Richard Feynman. He's mentioned a number of times in that sitcom. He shared these words, which I think are quite important. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool. Okay, so the reason I share this is because when we talk about time management, it's a personal responsibility. So a lot of people will blame external environments as a reason why they can't get things done. Okay. So number one, you have to take personal responsibility. And number two, you have to be brutally honest with yourself, because you can fool yourself into thinking that you can't get things done because of other reasons besides yourself. So this is very important to remember from the outset. Then in each presentation that I give, I like to recommend key books that have benefited me for a number of years. Now, my strongest advice is not only to get hold of these books, but to actually read them. So, that might seem a bit funny, but in my experience in teaching and training, people don't get through a book from cover to cover. Now, this particular book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I've been reading this book and rereading it for about 16 years now. It's still available in the bookstores, a very popular book because it's research based. So this book you'll be able to go back to time and time again and still get benefit from it. So the first recommended reading is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey, right? So as soon as you can, try and get a hold of these books. If you cannot, or in the interim, go on YouTube and search for summaries or reviews of these books, and that will even be of benefit to you. The second book is called Getting Things Done by David Allen. And Getting Things Done became an acronym and became a phenomenon across the world, right? So people now talk about GTD, which is the acronym for Getting Things Done. This book is also research-based. It came from David Allen's work in the business environment. And over years of helping people with time management, he drew on all of those years of experience and wrote this book, which is extremely, extremely powerful. So those are the two books that I recommend. Please get them and please read them from cover to cover. And in the interim, before getting them, at least try and watch some reviews or summaries of these books. Okay, so now I want to look at the differences between the words efficiency and effectiveness, which many people have some confusion about. So to be efficient is to do something right, to do something in the right way, to do something correctly. That is to be efficient, right? But many times people are being efficient in the wrong things, meaning they're not being effective. So being effective means doing the right thing, the thing that is best for you to do at that particular time, right? So you want to be efficient, yes, but in an effective way. So people that are overly focused on efficiency are people that are caught up in what we call busy work, right? So they're busy all the time. They're busy, they're doing stuff. They're doing those stuff correctly, but it's the wrong thing to be doing in the first place, okay? So we have to understand these differences. And, for the most part, we are not taught this at an early enough stage, and we're not sort of reminded about this enough. So people often make this mistake. So I've continuously been trying to teach people about this so that we can get this right. So yes, we want to be efficient, but in an effective manner, meaning we want to do the right things, but we want to be doing things that are best to be done in that particular time, okay? So time management is actually the popular term. So that's why we still use it, because when we talk about time management, we know what we're talking about, right? But actually, you and I cannot manage time, right? Because time is a constant. But what we can do is we can manage ourselves, right? So it's actually all about self-management. The key to our success is to manage ourselves better, right? So it actually, if I had my way, I wouldn't call it time management, right? I would call it self-management, because each of us have the same 24 hours in a day. But there are some people who are super productive and some people who are super effective in their day, and others are simply not, okay? And the reason for this is because we cannot manage ourselves properly. So think about it in your education or in a work environment. You might find someone who's always late, right? So this person always arrives late, and they always have what they call a reason, but it's actually not a reason, it's an excuse for being late, right? That is simply someone who doesn't manage themselves well. So, like I said in the very first slide, we don't want to fool ourselves, right? We want to be brutally honest with ourselves that this is up to us, okay? And if we do that, we will improve this thing called self-management. Okay, so this presentation we will share with all of you after the session. So you don't have to write down everything that you see in the slides, although I will recommend that you make some notes as I present. But there are a few quotes like this that are in the presentation that you can get when you receive the PDF. This is a quote by a Islamic scholar named Imam Gazalli, a very, very popular scholar. And I'll read it to you, and then I'll give you just a little explanation, right? He says, your time should not be without any structure, such that you occupy yourself arbitrarily with whatever comes along. Rather, you must take account of yourself and order your worship during the day and the night, assigning to each period of time an activity that must not be neglected nor replaced by another activity. Okay, now that's just a few lines, but we can talk the whole day on just those few lines. Okay, so let's look at the first part. Your time should not be without any structure. So right now it's almost 11:30 a.m. If I ask you, what are you doing at 2 p.m. today? You should be able to tell me, right? So you have to have structure in your day. And it doesn't necessarily have to be work. You can say to me that at 2 p.m. today, I'm actually going to spend some time with my family. Or I'm actually going to have a nap at 2 p.m., right? But there must be structure. You must be able to look at your day and know what you want to achieve in that day, right? And as human beings, we fulfill many roles within the day, right? So you're a student, you're a sibling, you might be a parent. So we have all these roles, and how are we effective in these roles if we do not have structure, right? So that's the first bit he talks about. Then he says, such that you occupy yourself arbitrarily with whatever comes along. Now, here he's saying that if you do not have structure, if you do not have high priorities in your day will be consumed with low priorities, right? So, so at 2 p.m. today, if you do not have structure, you will end up just going on your phone, flipping through social media, and before you know it, 2 hours are gone, right? So lower priorities will replace higher priorities because the higher priorities are not structured and they're not scheduled, okay? Then he says, rather, you must take account of yourself, right? Now, that take account of yourself is what I've mentioned twice already, that this is personal responsibility. So we have to look at ourselves and be brutally honest and take account of ourselves, right? So did we have a good day? That is a question to ask at the end of the day. And at the beginning of the day, we have to know what we want to achieve in that day, right? We don't want to just get by. We want to actually thrive in our days, right? So this is taking account of ourselves. And then he says, order your worship during the day and the night. Now, this is a religious scholar, so he's talking about worship, but this applies to everything else. This is your schedule, right? Order your worship during the day and the night. Order your schedule, order your activities, order your priorities during the day and the night, okay? So, for example, I run a series called Daily Advice, and yesterday's message, the advice was to read for 30 minutes every morning. The first thing you do in the morning, I recommend that you read for 30 minutes, right? That is ordering the day and the night, right? So then he says, assigning to each period of time an activity that must not be neglected, right? Meaning that this is what I call a hard edge, right? So these are things that you don't want to replace, or you don't want to overlook them because you know you have to do them, like reading, right? And reading is a quadrant 2 activity, which we'll talk about in a few minutes' time. So we must commit to certain things, and then we must stick by that commitment. That's extremely important, right? Because if we do not do that, then we will simply lose track of what we want to do, and we will simply replace them with other things, right? So this is extremely important. So we'll go, and this is, by the way, this is actually part of a longer quotation by Imam Gazalli, but I've just used, a part of it. And as you have witnessed, what you want to do when you're learning is you want to dissect every part of a lesson. So from each sentence, we broke it up into 2 or 3 components to dive into what is actually meant. And I recommend that you do that with all of your learning. That's how you'll get the best out of seeking knowledge. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Covey's time management matrix, right? Now, the first book I recommended to read is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. And this time management matrix is in that book. Okay, so I'll go over the concept in a brief way because we have limited time today, but please get the book so that you can delve into it in a much deeper way. Okay, so our time is essentially found in one of 4 quadrants, right? So these are the 4 quadrants, quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. And every activity, every day is in one of these quadrants, okay? So right now, this very minute, myself and yourself, we find ourselves in quadrant 2, right? Quadrant 2 are things that are important because it's in the top row, and things that are not urgent, which is on the right column, right? This presentation is important, but it's not urgent. Okay, so all of you who have logged in today, and you know, welcome to those who have logged in a bit late. All of you who have logged in, you didn't have to log in. Like, no one's holding a gun to your head, right? This is by choice, and it's not urgent, right? You could have said, you know what, I'll just watch the recording tomorrow, right? You didn't have to log into the live session, okay? But it is important though. That's why it's in quadrant 2. A minute ago, I spoke about reading for 30 minutes every morning. That's not urgent, but it's important, right? So that was just, you know, a brief example, but let me go through the quadrants for you one by one. So quadrant 1 are the things that are both urgent and important, okay? These we call crises, right? In the workplace, you will find throughout your life, throughout your career, you will find people who continuously manage by crisis, meaning they're putting out fires the whole day. They're in quadrant 1 the whole day because they do not manage themselves, and they do not manage time, and they do not manage others well. So they are always doing something which is either urgent, they're always doing something which is both urgent and important, okay? So we don't want to be in this quadrant, right? If you're in quadrant 1, you have to say to yourself, oh no, I'm in the wrong quadrant. Now, most of our time in quadrant 1 is self-imposed. So for example, when we don't study for an exam and it comes the night before and we want to cram in and we want to study the whole night and not lose and not sleep and drink all these energy drinks, that is a self-imposed crisis. It's self-imposed, right? And most of the crises in quadrant 1 are self-imposed. However, I must make something clear that sometimes quadrant 1 is imposed on us externally, things that we cannot control. So for example, if you get a call that a loved one is sick, right? You might have to drop everything you're doing and rush to help that person. That's a quadrant 1 activity, but that is one that you did not cause by yourself, and it's no one's fault really. That's part of life, okay? So a small portion of quadrant 1 activities are imposed on us, but most of them are imposed by ourselves, right? So we want to stay away from this quadrant as much as possible. Now, quadrant 2 is the magic quadrant. That's where you want to live. So throughout your day, you want to evaluate yourself and ask, am I in quadrant 2, right? And if you are, that's good. If you're not, you want to change that, okay? So quadrant 2 are the important things, but not urgent things, right? Like this presentation, like reading a book, like exercise, like building relationships, right? So we're all in this COVID-19 crisis. And since the start of the lockdown, what I've done is every day I reach out to someone, right? And I ask them how they're doing. And this week, I reached out to a friend. I hadn't spoken to this friend in a month, right? During lockdown, I did speak to her, but for the last month, I did not speak to her. So a few days ago, I sent her a message and I said, how are you doing? I hope you're healthy. And she replied and she said, I actually had the virus. She caught the virus from her grandmother. And she says, but I'm recovered now, right? That is a quadrant 2 activity, right? Building relationships, right? Talking to people, reading, studying, doing research, right? And you'll see there on the screen, the last one is recreation, right? So why is recreation in quadrant 2? Because it's important to also have a break, right? So what I do almost daily is I watch Netflix, right? As I'm sure many people do, right? That's my recreation. That recharges my batteries, right? But if you binge watch a series, and I can see some smiles from some of the people on the screen, if you binge watch a series over a weekend, right? That is actually not quadrant 2. Then you're actually in quadrant 4, right? And we'll get to quadrant 4 in a minute. But when you watch a movie, right? Or you watch an episode or 2 episodes of a series, that's called taking a break, right? That is recreation. That is needed because you cannot be in go mode 24/7. You'll burn out, right? And because of lockdown, people are working from home. So people are saying, oh no. So there's some memes about this, right? So people are saying, oh no, I don't leave work anymore, right? Because I'm at work all day because work is at home, right? Now, just a point on that, if you do work from home, you should separate where you work from where you do personal things, right? So that work becomes a place in your home. And you only go to that place or sit in that chair when you're actually working. And when work is done, you actually leave that place and you don't go back until you start working again, right? But anyway, so if you take a break, that is quadrant 2, right? But so what I do when I take a break is I don't use my phone, right? Because my phone is for the most part work, right? So people are communicating with me. So for example, this presentation, we liaised by WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is work, right? So when I take a break, I actually take a real break, right? Now, I do that because I understand the importance of quadrant 2, okay? Now, quadrant 3 are the things that are urgent, but not important, okay? So The difference with quadrant 3, and you will need to remember this, otherwise you will be confused. The difference about quadrant 3 is that quadrant 3 is mostly about other people, right? It's mostly about other people. So quadrant 3, you'll see the interruptions, right? So if you have notifications on your phone, right, you will always slide into quadrant 3 throughout your day, right? So you might be doing something and you'll get a notification on your phone that an email has come in, right? So then immediately you open the email and you start replying. That's actually quadrant 3. It's an interruption, right? Why? Because you could have responded to that email later on your schedule, right? So people go back and forth into doing different things and they're not productive because they don't have structure, right? So I deal with lots of people in the corporate world, and a lot of people say to me, especially if they're a manager, they say to me that they cannot get their work done during the day because every 5 minutes, someone knocks on the door in the office and says to them, I need this, help me with this, I need this, help me with this, right? Those are quadrant 3 activities, right? Now, when you're a manager, you need to help your staff, you need to help your team, right? But how you do it is in a structured way. So you tell people between 8 and 9 every morning and between 3 and 4 every afternoon, that's when you can come to my office to ask for help or to ask for assistance. But other than those times, I'm not available, right? And in that way, you are not interrupted and you can actually get your own work done. Okay, so when I'm a very deep researcher, right? So when I research, I go very deep into my work, and when I'm doing that, I actually put my phone on airplane mode, right? Because I don't even want to think about who's trying to call me, right? Because when someone calls you, you can simply ignore the call. But if you know someone was trying to call you, now your brain starts to think about that, right? Now you start thinking, okay, why did they call me? Is it urgent, right? So what I do is I actually put my phone on airplane mode because I don't want to know who's trying to call me, right? So this is how we control our time, right? So quadrant 3, we don't want to be there. We don't want to be interrupted by other people's priorities. Because when someone sends me an email, that email is a priority for them. But it's not a priority for me to answer that email that very second. Okay, so I actually, I have no notifications on my phone, right? And I recommend that people take notifications off their phone. And especially now, during this lockdown and with this COVID-19 virus, your notifications actually will increase your anxiety, right? So a lot of people are suffering right now with anxiety and depression, and being able to control your environment and control your day will help you with your depression and anxiety, right? So I highly recommend to not have notifications turned on. Now, quadrant 4 is things that are not urgent and not important, right? So it's basically wasting time, right? Now, when you're binge watching a series, and I find this amazing. So as a season might have 20 or 30 episodes, and people will go through that in a day or in a weekend, right? That's quadrant 4. That's not taking a break, right? That's indulgence. So you are simply wasting time on something that is not important and not urgent, right? And it's different to quadrant 2, because when you're taking a break to watch a movie, then that's actually important, because it allows you to relax, it allows you to recharge, right? So quadrant 4 is the killer of all 4, because it's wasting time, right? There's nothing good in quadrant 4. Okay, so we'll move on. Just as a summary, quadrant 1 are things that are urgent and important, right? So that quadrant we have to manage, right? So like I said, things that come into us externally, we cannot control that, and we have to deal with it, right? So you know, these are most of the time negative things, right? So you know, I've had growing up, I've had some experience with crime in South Africa, right? So you're woken up in the morning by someone trying to break into your house, right? Now the rest of your day is focused on dealing with that, right? So you know, in a practical sense, you have to get someone to come replace a window that this burglar broke, and you have to call the police, and the police come, you have to give them a statement, and then they do fingerprints. This is all quadrant 1. Like during that day, I have to cancel all my meetings. I have to cancel all my everything that's on my schedule, because this is now urgent and important. So, but that doesn't happen every day, thankfully, right? These external crises do not happen every day. So we have to manage them when they do happen. And regarding the self-imposed crises, we need to eliminate that, right? So if you have a deadline, work for 20 minutes a day to reach that deadline, so that you don't cram everything on the last minute, right? Quadrant 2, things that are not urgent but important, right? This is where you want to live. You want to have all your attention focused in this quadrant, right? And it's not just work. Like I said, it's Netflix. It's, you know, just having a relaxing meal with a friend or family member, right? Quadrant 3, things that are urgent and not important. This you must limit. And like I said, this is most of the time things that are involving other people. And then quadrant 4, you want to totally avoid, because these are time wasters, right? They're not urgent and they're not important. Okay, so right. So the results of quadrant 1 is that you'll have stress, burnout, you'll be in crisis management, and you're always putting out fires, right? That's why you want to manage this quadrant as much as possible, right? So the rest of the slides in the results, I'm going to go through really quickly, because I think you guys understand these concepts. Quadrant 2, the results are all positive, right? Because everything we do has a particular result, right? The results of quadrant 2 is productivity, right? Effectiveness, vision, right? You'll have better perspective, right? You'll inculcate discipline into your life. You have control of your time. These are all positive things. There's you know, I cannot think of anything negative from a quadrant 2 activity, right? Quadrant 3, short-term focus, because you're always being disturbed, right? And crisis management, because you're not getting work done, because you're always allowing for disturbances, right? So you start to feel victimized. You start to blame others for wasting your time, but actually you're simply just not controlling your time, right? So these are all negative results in quadrant 3, which you want to avoid, right? Quadrant 4 will result in guilt, right? So if you binge watch a series on Netflix over one weekend, you're going to feel bad about it on Monday. While you're doing it, you're enjoying it, but you're going to feel guilty later, right? No time for meaningful activities, right? Meaning quadrant 2 activities, right? You'll receive blame from others. People will tell you, oh, you're lazy, right? you will lose credibility, right? People won't trust you because you don't show any control in your time, okay? So next, I want to talk just very briefly about two laws. The first is Paretos law, that 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes, right? This is known as the 80-20 rule. There's also a book called the 80-20 rule, which I highly recommend. Now, what does it mean? It means that 20% of the input results in 80% of the output. Now, how can we understand this? So this presentation, right, is so my seeking knowledge, my research, my reading is my input, right? So let's take all my years of study and research as the input, as the 100% input, right? But today, I'm only sharing with you 20% of what I've learned. I'm sharing with you the main things of my research, right? So you might read a page in a book, right? But there might only be one line in the book that is really significant that you want to share. So from all my research, today I'm sharing with you 20% of what I've taken in, my input. But that 20% has an 80% effect on you, right? So, so this is very important to understand when we're dealing with time and thinking about time, okay? So when I read or when I study, I cannot share 100% of what I've studied, but I need to study the 100% to find the 20% of gems to give you that 80%, right? So what I'm giving to you, the complete presentation is the 100%, but the 80% is what will be meaningful for each of you, and that 80% will be different for each of you. 20% of what I say, you know, won't really impact many of you, right? So this is a very limited presentation. I'm just giving you glimpses of these tools and these concepts so you can go and do some more research as you go along. Like I watch a lot of documentaries, but I sit with my phone or my iPad, right? And when someone mentions something that I don't know, I'll pause and I'll go and do extra research. That's how you're going to learn, right? And it's a habit that you should cultivate. Okay, so the next one is Parkinson's Law, right? So Parkinson's Law says work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion, right? So this is why people are always late with deadlines and with things they need to do, because they have weeks or months, the work itself expands, right? So you have to have defined constraints for everything you do, right? So if you need to do something, you need to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to spend 1 hour on this. Or you might say, for the next month, I'm going to spend 1 hour every day, right? But if you do not constrain yourself, the work itself will expand. And that's why many people don't get many things done, right? So I'm an observational researcher. So I look at the behavior of people that I have interacted with throughout my life. And most people waste time. Most people are not productive, right? And it's because of all of these reasons, because we are not taught these tools. We are not taught to have constraints, right? So a presentation like this, we actually have to have a time limit, because if we just said, okay, let's talk about time management, I could talk to you the whole day. Like I wouldn't run out of material to talk to you about, right? But that would not be productive for you or for me. So that's why it's constrained, right? So, so Parkinson's law, very important, and you should go and do the extra research. So this is a little cartoon, like this guy's he's taking a nice stroll, he's singing. The finish line's up ahead, but he's got no rush to get there, right? Because there's no time limit. There's no one running behind him, right? This cartoon is very simple, but it's actually an illustration of life for most people, right? People just taking their time, having a good, having a leisurely walk, and they're not getting anything done. They're not reaching the finishing line with anything. Okay. So now we'll talk about getting things done. And before I actually go into the book, the Getting Things Done is the book I recommended at the beginning. Before I get into the concepts of the book, I strongly recommend a bias towards action or a bias towards shipping, right? Meaning you're inclined to action or you're inclined to ship. Shipping means to get something out the door, right? Whether it's a package that you're selling and you want to ship that, or whether it's an email that you have to write, right? So sometimes we procrastinate because we're wasting time. And, procrastination has its root in fear, which is something else we can talk about on another day. But sometimes we also procrastinate because we're unsure about something, right? So I have a business email that I have to send, which is going to be the start of a difficult process with a former client of mine. And I've been delaying this email for about 2 months now, right? Which is something many of us fall into. And the reason I'm delaying this is because I'm not sure, because, it's going to ruffle some feathers, right? But I'm always going to wonder, so I need to get it done, right? So my advice to you is to always have a bias towards action, right? To make sure that you do something, right? Because most people have a bias towards thinking, and that becomes overthinking, right? So you're thinking about something, you're thinking about it your entire life, but you haven't done anything, right? So that's important. Action is where the magic is, right? Look at the most successful companies in the world. It is a result of people who took action, right? You and I can have 1,000 ideas a day for a business, but until we take action, nothing will happen, right? So these are the 5 steps of GTD, right? Now, again, I can just give you a high level in this presentation. So I highly recommend that you get the book. But essentially, what the book is about is to have a system of how you are productive, right? So, like I said earlier, if I ask you, what are you doing at 2 p.m. today? If you don't know, it means you don't have a schedule, right? It means you don't have a system, right? And like I said, it doesn't mean you have to be working at 2 p.m. You could be, planning to watch a movie at 2 p.m. That's fine, right? But you must know what you're going to do, right? Now, that's part of a system. That's part of a scheduling system. Now, GTD equally is a system, right? It's a system of getting things out of your brain and into a system where you know it's going to get done, right? So step 1 is to capture, right? What does that mean? It means that all the little scribbles of paper of I need to do this, I need to do that, the little notes on your computer, the open folders, quote unquote, open folders in your brain. I'm sure you have like 1,000 of them. All these open folders, all these things that are pending, they need to be captured into a system, right? And the system can be paper-based or it can be electronic. And there's a whole lot of tools that I actually use. And, we just don't have time to go into all of them right now. But I'm inclined to digital tools, right? But you can do this paper-based as well. But the first step is to capture all these things. What do I need to do, right? So I need to go and get my car license renewed, right? I need to go to the tire company to go and check my tire because it always gets flat, right? I need to go and buy this. I need to go and research that, right? All of these things are open folders and we don't get them done because we don't have a system, right? So step one is to capture, is to take all the open loops and put it somewhere, right? So the first step is the chaos step, right? So every path to success starts with chaos. So step one, there's chaos because it's just a whole mess of things that you need to do. Step two is to clarify. Okay, what is this? Is this urgent? Is this not urgent? Should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? Should I do this myself or should I delegate it, right? So now you start to clarify, right? Then step three is to organize different things. So for example, in the GTD book, David Allen talks about something called waiting for, right? So waiting for are the things that are open loops in your head that you're waiting for other people to respond to. So you're waiting for someone to pay an invoice. You're waiting for someone to reply to an email. You're waiting for someone to say yes or no on something that you proposed, right? But you need to know what you're waiting for, right? Because if you don't have a waiting for list, 2 weeks later, you'll realize in the middle of the night, oh, that guy didn't mail me back because you don't have an organized system, right? Then, for example, there are certain people you want to call. Sometimes you have a list of people that need a phone call from you, right? Now, before lockdown, I used to do all my calls while driving, right? So obviously, hands-free, but I had a list on my phone, right? In an app of all the calls I need to make. So when I get in the car, I open this app and I see the list and I make my calls. So while I'm driving, I'm making calls and I'm being productive. But I can only do that if I'm organized, right? So obviously I don't do that anymore because of lockdown. Like, so I'll tell you a little joke, which might be common for many people, is that I filled my car with petrol or diesel rather in early March, and I'm still 3/4 tank. I still have 3/4 right full because I'm not driving. So so obviously life has changed for all of us, but you have to have an organized system. That's the point, right? So if I ask you, what do you need to achieve over the next month in your studies, and you don't have an organized system to tell me I need to do A, B, and C, then that means you don't have a system. So you won't get things done because you're not organized, right? And then step 4 is to reflect. So now you need to look back. Okay, is the system working? Am I getting things done? What was last week's results? How do I measure my last week of activity? And how am I going to measure the week ahead, right? So you always have, so this is what David Allen calls the weekly review, right? So I do my weekly reviews on a Sunday, right? For 1 hour on a Sunday, and it's a casual 1 hour, right? Like I don't need to be at my desk, and I don't need to be, in full focus mode, but it's an hour of looking at what I did the week before and what I need to get done the week ahead. And then engage means that um, your list of things to do have to be engaged with, meaning they have to be current, right? Like a lot of people are doing things today because of an old goal that they had, but now the goal might have changed, but they're still doing that thing, right? Because they're not engaged with their activities. They are not present with what they need to do or what they need to get done, right? So you have to keep engaging with what is on your schedule, with what you have to do, and with your life. So in general, this covers life. This is not just about work. This is about your personal things as well. I mentioned that earlier, an example of getting your car license. That's actually a real thing that I need to do, right? I need to actually go to the traffic department and get my license renewed for my car, right? Because this is all life. We all have many things to do, but we have to have a system. It has to be organized, right? So, so I believe we have a few minutes left. So I will be done shortly, and then hopefully we can go into Q&A. So what is mastery, right? Now, you might have heard this term, jack of all trades, master of none. And when I grew up, I heard people say this term often, but they said it in a way, in a positive way, right? They said that, it sounded to me like this was a good thing, but I don't believe it's a good thing, right? To be a jack of all trades and a master of none. I believe in mastery, right? So you choose one thing or a few things and you focus your time on that, right? So think of all the great people in business or in art or in anything. They didn't do a million things, right? They focused on one thing or a few things and they became masters of that. And that's why we know them today. And very interestingly, what you'll find, if you study successful people of the past, you will find that the things that they were not masters in, they were often very terrible at. Like they failed in other areas of life, right? But they focused on mastery in a few things, which is what is very important, okay? So step one towards mastery is to raise your standards, right? So what does that mean? So, so I'll give you this example. I'm, for the last month, I've been researching TikTok, right? So every day I spend a little time on TikTok to see what's going on TikTok, right? And I'm using TikTok on 2 different phones, right? Because I'm testing the algorithm. So on one phone, if I use TikTok on there, my experience is different to when I use it on another phone, because the algorithm sees it as 2 different people, right? So, but that aside, what I saw last night, I saw this video on TikTok of this lady. She's very well dressed, right? And she has pictures of women who travel, women at airports in yoga pants, right? And she's complaining and she's saying, why do you travel like that? That's for your yoga. That's for, what you do in your home or privately. And she's saying that when you travel, you have to look presentable. And she's saying that, people don't take care of how they look anymore, etc. Right? Now that whole issue is debatable. But my point is that she's talking about raising your standards, right? So the first step to mastery is that you have to raise your standards, right? That's step one, right? And this is a very, a quote that's close to my heart. Good is the enemy of great, right? By a researcher named Jim Collins. It's in a book called Good to Great, which is a fantastic book, which I recommend this book in, other courses that I do. So step two, discard your limiting beliefs, right? You have limiting beliefs. Everyone listening to this, I'm talking to you personally, right? You have limiting beliefs. You believe that I can't do this, or I'll never achieve that, right? That's a limiting belief and it's not true, right? There is no boundary of what you can achieve in life, right? The only boundary is what you believe about yourself. So look at people who come from impoverished or very difficult backgrounds. You find some of them stay in that place, and then you find some of them who become world famous and very successful in different areas of life. It's all because of our belief systems, right? Which is maybe a topic we can cover in a session like this in the future. I teach values and beliefs. We all have values, things that are important to us, and we all have beliefs, right? So we have personal beliefs where we say, I can't do that, right? And then we have global beliefs, right? So some people will say that the world is an ugly place. That's a belief about the world. Whereas my belief personally is that the world is a beautiful place. And my experience will be different to the person who believes the world is an ugly place, right? So step two is discard limiting beliefs. Step three, continuously abandon your comfort zone, right? Your comfort zone is not useful to you. You will not grow there. You have to push yourself into areas that are unknown, things that have, that are difficult for you to do, right? This is extremely important, right? If you do this, you will become good at things that you pursue because you will become accustomed to pushing the boundaries, right? That's why people have coaches. That's why, I do coaching. You have coaching in sports, right? You have coaching in all these different areas of life. The coach helps you push out of your comfort zone, and the coach helps you reach your potential, right? So the next thing is upgrade your circle, right? Who are you spending time with, right? Who are you interacting with? At the end of the day, think about all the people you talk to today, right? And think about, is that the circle that you need, right? And it doesn't mean you don't have to love those people, but you might have to upgrade them, right? Because people will hold you back, right? If your company, the people in your circle, if all they're doing is talking about others, complaining about the government and all of these things, that's not the circle you want, right? You want to have a circle where people are talking, okay, what are we going to do next, right? What opportunities are there that we can take advantage of, right? That's the circle that you want. And and obviously, I'm just going through this very fast because I have a few more slides left, and then, because I'm very conscious of time. Step 4 to mastery is practice, drill, and rehearse, right? You are not going to be an expert in anything if you just do it once, right? You have to do it over and over and over and over again, right? So you might know the tennis star Serena Williams, right? She beat the 22 of the 27 top women in tennis, and there's a picture going around of her on social media where she's practicing with her young daughter, right? So she's training her daughter from a young age to be an expert, right? To be an expert tennis player. Practice, drill, and rehearse, right? Everyone who has ever been successful in anything has spent hours and hours and hours in that area, right? Some people, they just want to spend 5 minutes on something and they want to be good at it, right? It doesn't work like that. That's not the route to mastery. Okay, so I'm not going to read this quote because of time, but you will receive it in the PDF when you get it. This is a quote by Tony Robbins on mastery, right? I won't even start to get into it because it's going to take me 15 minutes, right? But we'll send this to you. Step 5 to mastery, sharpen the saw. What does that mean? It means continuously improving yourself, right? So sharpen the saw for me currently is exercise, right? To become a better me, I need to exercise and I need to eat better. So that's something I'm working on right now, right? Still the early stages, and I'm going to start it slowly, step by step, but that's how you become a master of yourself, because it's not just about health, it's going to impact all the other areas of my life, right? So this is continuous improvement. You're on this session today. This is sharpening your saw, right? You're learning things. You're thinking about things in a different way. This is about you improving yourself. This is the path to mastery, right? Okay, so we've gone through all the slides. The only one I skipped was the Tony Robbins quote, which would take me a bit of time to go into. But I do believe we've been going for about an hour. So now we have the Q&A, and I don't have the chat window open, so I don't know if any questions came through. So Ilyas, I will leave it over to you.
Yeah, so just there weren't any questions during the session. So if you want to type a message, you can, but you also are welcome to unmute your mic and ask your question verbally. The idea is really just to make it a very interactive discussion, because this talk is for you guys, and we want you guys to benefit the most from it. Perhaps if there's anybody would like to start off, I'm sure there are lots of questions. We're very blessed to have students. We've got university students, high school students. I've got some of my old teachers from high school who are here, so there's quite a wide variety of people who can share their insights. So if anybody would like to ask the first question, you're welcome to do so. You're allowed to unmute your mics. I've allowed you to.
Sorry, I had a question. Sorry. Can I ask a question to Brother Jamaaludeen?
Yes, sure, Fatima.
Oh, sorry, shukran so much for the enlightening lesson. I just had a question with regards to time management. Brother mentioned, people trying to contact you. So sometimes what I find is that oftentimes during the day, a lot of WhatsApp messages will accumulate, which of course, because I'm focusing on, achieving my goals, I don't have time to answer it. But I find sometimes with people, they can get offended when one takes a long while to respond. So how do you deal with that aspect in terms of trying to explain to people that you won't always be available at the drop of a hat? Like, how do you deal with that part of it in terms of them perhaps taking offense because you're responding after a lengthy while and such?
Yeah, okay. So thank you for the question. It's a very good question. I wish I could show you my phone right now. I have WhatsApp messages from a few days to a few weeks ago that I haven't responded to yet, right? Facebook messages, because, you know, it's not only WhatsApp, it's emails, Facebook Messenger, you have all these different mediums. You cannot respond to everyone. That's something you have to accept, right? Because most of that is quadrant 3, right? So if I spent my day replying to messages, that's the only thing I would do during the day. So my day would start, I would start replying to people, the day would end, and I'd still be busily replying to people. So it's about prioritization, right? So prioritization means that you respond to the things that are both important and or actually just that. Those are the messages that are important. They're all urgent because, you know, people want to reply immediately. But you have to make the call. And some people will be offended, but you simply, when you do speak to them, you simply be honest and say, look, I do apologize, but I cannot respond to every message immediately. And you cannot control how people feel about that, because your intention is what you need to check for yourself, right? So it's, you have to control your life, right? So for example, because I do a lot of coaching, people ask me for advice every single day, 7 days a week without fail, right? So for example, I have a long message that I have to respond to of a friend of mine. He's a Muslim guy, and he's in a relationship now recently with a white woman who's not Christian. Sorry, who's not Muslim, she's Christian. And he wants to know some advice about, you know, marrying her and what that might entail and all of these things. Very long message. He sent it a week ago. I haven't replied yet, right? It's urgent for him, but I haven't gotten to it yet. Right? It's not that I don't want to, but you have to be realistic for your life. Right? And, you know, because of time, I won't share all the stories, but there's a lot of evidence of people, the more successful you get, the more busy you become and productive you become, the more inflow of messages will increase, because people want to associate themselves with people who are busy and productive and successful, right? So like my messages don't stop. Like I'm currently talking to a former client for the last few days, and a few days ago I responded to her. She sent me a message in March which I didn't respond to. A few days ago I responded, and we've been talking for the last few days, right? Because I just couldn't get to it. And that's okay. So Fatima, my advice to you, don't lose sleep about it. Do your best and have it scheduled. So I have portions in my day where I do responses, and that's the only time I can respond to people.
Okay.
Right? Another thing, so I just in passing earlier, I mentioned anxiety. What increases people in anxiety is video calls, right? So this week we signed up a new client, and out of the blue, twice this week he video called me, right? And I simply didn't take the call. Right? And I sent him a text message later, and I said, look, I'm busy right now, I'll respond to you later. So I've trained him that he can't just video call me at any time of the day, unscheduled, and I'm just going to take his call. Right? So you have to set the parameters and educate people about how you work and how you would like to interact with them. And with respect, you know, this is, we have respect for other people, but we also have respect for ourselves.
Yes.
So I try as much as possible to communicate and speak to people. So for example, Ilyas will tell you that last night after midnight, I responded to one of his messages on WhatsApp, right? So I try to communicate as much as I can, but I don't do sleep when I can't, because my objectives, my goals are more important to me than anything else.
Okay. Okay. Shukran so much.
Afwan. Any other questions?
Majda, I see your mic is unmuted. Would you like to ask a question?
Oh, yes, Kanala. Oh, actually, it's a statement. So a lot of what Jamaaludeen has said has resonated with me, because I don't know if you saw my comment. I also have trouble with time management, the fact that I have to work from home. But I started implementing these small things. I've got this motivational app, and it just says the way you allow people to occupy your time is how they're gonna treat you. So if you allow people to walk all over you and just demand things from you all the time and expect your help in return, I had to nicely say to them, look here, I'm only going to respond when I can, and I haven't lost sleep over it, and it's actually started working for me. So I end my shift when I'm supposed to, not after, and I take my breaks like I'm supposed to. So this has resonated, and I can definitely say it started working for me, but I'm only a few days into it, so it's really good.
Okay, Majda, that's very, very well done. It's people will start to respect you when you do this, right?
Yeah.
So you have to, what you've just mentioned is that you've created boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So earlier I talked about hard edges, right? A hard edge is a boundary.
Okay.
And so when you're done working, that's when you're done responding to work correspondence. So, earlier this week, people were discussing this on Twitter, right? And one guy was saying that he has a client who will call him before 7 o'clock in the morning, right? And there are people who will, clients will contact you at 10 p.m. at night as well, because they think that you should be always, on standby for them, right? But you can't. That's what increases anxiety, right? And there's one of my mentors is a guy named Dave Duarte, right? I've known him for many, many years. I've done some work with him. And a few years ago, I wanted to meet with him to discuss something. And I emailed him and he replied to me saying, he's not taking any meetings right now. He's extremely busy, but he'll try and make some time for me in about 2 or 3 months. And this was years ago. And I was like, whoa, like that's strange, right? But he had boundaries, right? And, I'm still very close to him today. We still interact quite a bit, but he taught me that about having boundaries, right? A nice boundary is on email to have an autoresponder, right? So a lot of people have this where they have an autoresponder and they'll say, look, I'm not paying much attention to email. So my responses will be delayed because I'm busy with, very important projects. And that's fine, right? So well done, Majda. Keep doing that, because your sanity is more important than anything. This is about mental health, right? You will have high anxiety if every time your phone beeps, you're running to your phone and replying to people, and you'll have this anxiety 24/7, and that's unhealthy. Okay, Ilyas, anyone else?
Yeah, there's another question from Redmi which says, Assalamu alaikum, between your family and varsity work, how would you choose what is more important, especially when varsity is taking up a lot of time?
Okay, so this is important. what I'm going to say next, please try to remember this sentence, right? It's a single sentence. Please try and remember it throughout your life, right? Everything in life is a trade-off, right? Everything in life is a trade-off. Now, let me explain what that means. Everything that you do, you have to sacrifice something else to do that. So right now, we're all in front of our computers and we're trading off everything else. We're trading off Netflix. We're trading off spending time with family. So for example, I need to go to Canal Walk to go and buy some things, which I will do after this. So during this time, I've traded this presentation to replace going to Canal Walk, right? So everything in life is a trade-off. Now, we have to make sacrifices, but we don't always know if it's the right sacrifice. But we have to make the best decision with the knowledge we have at the time, right? So, so you might have a family event, but you also have an exam, right? So you have to trade the family event to study for the exam, right? You might have different things pulling at you, different people pulling at you, but you have to always make a decision on what you are going to trade. But you make the decision based on what you think and feel at that time. But tomorrow, you might realize that you made the wrong decision, you made the wrong trade-off, and then you change it, right? Don't try to be perfect. This happens a lot in business, right? You do something, but then you realize a day or a week or a month later that you did the wrong thing. Most things are reversible, right? And when you're dealing with people like family members, a very important thing is to communicate clearly, is to tell people, I cannot do this, or I cannot spend time with you because I have these responsibilities. And most of the time, people will understand, right? So communicate clearly and understand what trade-offs you are willing to make and also the trade-offs you need to make. So on Fatima's question about WhatsApp messages, it's a trade-off. You can choose to respond to people the whole day, but then you don't get your work done. So you've traded your work for other people's priorities, right? So everything in life is a trade-off. We're always swapping one thing for the other, one thing for the other. And the more experienced you get, the better your decision-making will be regarding this, right? But don't seek perfection because no one is perfect, right? Don't beat yourself up. If you made a wrong decision, forgive yourself, right? As a coach, I deal with many people who live with regret and guilt about things they've done 10 and 20 and 30 years ago, right? And I very often, very commonly say to people, you have to be able to forgive yourself because you're walking around with excess baggage, right? You don't need to be perfect, right? Even if other people expect you to be perfect, right? They don't live your life. You do not need to be perfect because you're a human being. No one is perfect. So you have to give yourself a break, make your best decisions, and then change when and as you need to. Right, so I hope that's useful.
There's just another question which says, how do you leave your comfort zone if you are driven by fear?
Okay, so it is correct that that you will not leave your comfort zone if you have fear, but the way the question is phrased is inaccurate. You are not driven by fear. Fear is not a driving force. Fear is a crippling force. So you're not driven by fear, you're held back by fear, right? That's an important distinction to have, right? So fear, I want people to understand, is very different to danger, right? Fear is very different to danger. So this virus, this COVID-19 virus is dangerous, right? So I prefer to stay at home. I don't want to be around anyone. I don't want to go anywhere because there's danger, right? And it's a danger that I cannot see with my eyes. So I don't know where the danger is, right? Fear is something else. So fear is in our heads. Fear is not tangible danger. So people will say, I can't do this because I might fail. That's fear. That's not danger, right? People will say, I'll never be able to do that. I'll never succeed in that. That's fear, right? So there's an acronym that you can remember for fear, which is very useful. The acronym is FEAR stands for false events appearing real. False events appearing real, right? So again, to remind you of the distinction, fear is not driving you, it's crippling you, right? So the best advice I can give you regarding fear is to rush towards it and face it head on. What does that mean, right? It means that, let's say you fear to do something, you fear to make a call, you fear to send a proposal to someone. Anything that you fear, my advice is to do that thing with urgency. That's how you break the fear, right? Because fear feeds on one thing. The thing that fear feeds on is time. The more time you give fear, the bigger the fear will grow, right? And the more crippling it will be because it's become stronger. So my habit that I've inculcated over many years is that if there's anything I fear, that's the thing I'm going to do today or tomorrow, right? If there's anything I fear, that's the thing I'm going for, because that's the thing that's going to push me out of my comfort zone, right? So that's my advice. You're not driven by fear. You're crippled by it. And the way you defeat it is to face it head on and deprive it of its source of energy, which is time. You don't want to give more and more time to fear because the fear itself will grow. And so, for example, there are people who will never fly in an airplane, right? Because they have a fear. Yes, there is potential danger, but for the most part, it's fear-based. So what is the result? The crippling result is that they'll never see the world, right? So we mitigate our risk, but we cannot afford to let our lives be held back by fear. Okay, so I hope that that's useful for that questioner.
Are there any other questions? Andrew Koopman, would you like to come in? I know you were asked something last week. You have to unmute yourself. I can ask you to unmute. So Andrew Koopman is actually the founder of a study group in Mitchell's Plain, and he's been running it for the last 16 years.
Wow, it's amazing.
So he's doing a lot of good work there. So would you like, are you able to, I can't hear you, Andrew. Does it? No, I can't hear you now. I still can't. Can you hear him, Jamaaludeen?
No, I cannot hear anything.
Unless, Andrew, do you want to leave and then re-enter the meeting, and then we can maybe take another student's question?
Or just, Andrew, if you can just maybe text, send your question via text, maybe easier.
Yes. In the meanwhile, are there any other questions that students would like to ask? I know there are a lot of high school students here. Is there something that you think hasn't been addressed that you would like to ask? Okay, there's a question there. I'm a matric student, and people in my family expect a lot from me at the end of this year because all of my siblings were top students. I'm a person capable of it, but with all the pressure, I feel myself becoming more lazy and procrastinating a lot. Therefore, I see drop in my marks. My phone also has recently become a very big distraction because it's my way of forgetting my stress. What do I do?
Okay, so there's two things there. Firstly, it's the expectation of others, right? In this case, family members, and then procrastination and avoiding getting to studies, etc. So on the first point of expectations, you have to first do internal work. You have to accept who you are. You are not your siblings, right? Everyone in this world is good at something. Not all of us are good at academics, right? Yes, we have to strive our best, i.e. mastery. We have to strive for mastery in everything, but everyone has different strengths and different weaknesses. That's the first thing. So internally, you have to accept that. If you do not, you will have high anxiety for the rest of your life. Secondly, you have to communicate and over communicate with family members about what you're going through and what you're experiencing, right? Because this year, particularly 2020, is a very difficult year due to this virus, right? So matriculants especially, and also other students, have a very tough year because of what is going on in the world. So, so you have to be realistic, right? And not achieving the best of results does not mean that you're a failure, right? For example, at the start of lockdown, I reached out to a friend of mine who's a medical doctor, and his wife's also a medical doctor. So they're both, very successful people. And he spoke about his kids, and he said, he's not focused on his kids getting the best grades at school. He's focused on teaching them to be good human beings, right? To have good character, to be kind, to be good people, right? So these distinctions are very, very important. But you have to understand that our family members and our parents have different perspectives, right? So there's memes on social media where the child will say to the parent, I want to be a comedian. And then the parent will respond and say, it's pronounced doctor, right? So, to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer is highly regarded, but what you have to remember is that not everyone can be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, right? So you look at Riyad Musa, he's a medical doctor, but qualified medical doctor, but he's now a comedian, right? So you have to understand who you are, right? You have to understand who you are, and then you have to communicate that clearly to those around you. And like I said, you have to over communicate, right? You have to overemphasize. You have to keep talking about this, right? That's very important. Then what the questioner mentioned is about procrastinating and using the phone as a distraction and all of this. That's your fault, right? That's your fault. That's your responsibility. So if you fail, and I'm not talking about failing matric, I'm talking about if you fail at anything at any level, then you have to blame yourself, right? Because here's a phrase that I hope you all can remember. If it is to be, it's up to me, right? If it is to be, it's up to me. This is personal responsibility. So you have to make a decision, right? Now, decision comes from the word incision, which means to cut, right? So when we decide something, we cut away everything else, right? So there are people who have been walking around their homes during lockdown in, in their pajamas and just sitting in front of the TV watching Netflix. And there are other people who have written a book during lockdown because they made a different decision, right? So like I said to you earlier in this presentation, I'm at the moment spending time every day on TikTok, right? So I spend 30 minutes a day researching what people are doing in TikTok, why they're doing it, and how the algorithm works, right? But that's a decision I made. So you are making a decision to waste time. You are making a decision to procrastinate. Now, when we make a decision, we have to deal with the consequences. And the consequences are out of our hands, right? So if you make a decision not to study, and then the result is that you fail, then that failure has consequences. Then you have to deal with that, right? And when you're in matric, you're about 17, 18 years old. So you're still young, right? You're still young. And the more you go through life, the more you will realize the impact of your decisions, right? Like I made some bad decisions today, right? Every day, every day I make bad decisions, but I learn from them and I become better and I become better and I take personal responsibility. I don't blame anyone else. So if you really observe people around you, most people complain about everyone else, right? It's the government, it's my parents, it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. But people are very reluctant to take personal responsibility, right? So your phone is not holding a gun to your head to use it 24 hours a day, right? So you make a decision to use your phone and not study, not pay attention. Now, I will make this comment that I know it's a difficult time. This whole virus, this lockdown period, it's raised anxiety levels of everyone. And I say everyone, including myself, right? But we have to transcend the chaos. This anxiety of this virus is what I call chaos. And the successful people are the ones who will transcend it, right? The ones who will look at what they can control and what they cannot control and focus their energy on what they can control, right? So people are talking about we're reaching the peak of the virus. People are saying that there's going to be a second wave of the virus. These are all the things outside of our control. So we have to focus on what is in our control. So for this person in matric, what is in your control? It's in your control to monitor the time you spend on your phone each day and to spend more time studying, right? That's in your control. No one is holding you back from that, right? So I hope that's useful.
Taslima, you've raised your hand. Would you like to ask a question? We have to wrap things up soon, but I see you have raised your hand. Taslima.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I need to say I've been looking forward to this workshop because I've been struggling with time, and it's been going for as long as maybe 2 years. For the past 2 years, I started working mostly from home. I do work in media. And the problem I face, Jamaaludeen, is that I've got a lot of different projects happening with different clients at different times. And I have clients that are full year clients, and then I've got periodical clients as well. And so sometimes what I'm finding is that I absolutely loved it when you said that, you know, it's basically me that's not managing myself well in terms of time. But when looking at the 4 quadrants, I've tried that before, right? But I've noticed that it all depends on how my day starts. I have a routine, and if that routine breaks, it has a ripple effect on my day. But I struggle a lot with how much time to prioritize each project with. And I sometimes find that I'm busy 7 days a week, sometimes all day, and it's sometimes a juggle between home and work and whatever else is on my plate. And I think that's very common in the media industry. But if you can just give me some advice as to how to measure projects and priority given to them in structuring a plan to address them. And then also I wanted to ask you, does time matter in the sense of how early we start our day? And in terms of setting those boundaries, how do you do it so that it's not offensive to anyone? For instance, if I stay with my parents, and people come around all the time, how do you set those boundaries without it being offensive? Because in our community, if somebody comes, everybody goes out to greet, etc., and those distractions can be really, really huge. So if you can just give your advice also in how to set those boundaries without it being offensive. And it's an awesome workshop, by the way. So shukran, Ilyas and Jamaaludeen.
Thank you, Taslima. I will brag a little bit to everyone else that I know Taslima personally, a very good friend of mine. I wasn't aware, Taslima, that you're on this Zoom call, so I'm very glad to speak to you. So, you've posed 3 main questions. The first one being on structuring projects. I'm involved in multiple things, and each of them take time, right? So you have to be realistic about 2 things. The first thing you have to be realistic about is how much time you have available. And the second thing you have to be realistic about is how much time you want to spend working, right? Now, everything that you do has a main allocation of time and then a supplementary allocation of time. So what does that mean? It means that the main allocation of time, for example, in this presentation, is the minute I started speaking to all of you until this presentation ends, right? That's the primary allocation of time. But before this presentation started, I had to prepare, right? So there's another supplementary allocation of time. And when this presentation ends, I have to do some admin work, right? So I do what I call a post-mortem. So I'll write, I'll make notes on questions asked, things that I've learned, things that I've thought about during the session, etc. Right? Now you have to take all of that into account. So, for example, what many people do is that they schedule meetings, but they don't allocate time for traveling to those meetings, right? So these are the people that are always rushing, that are always late, right? So you have to pay attention to the time you need to execute something, and you have to be realistic about that, right? So for my coaching work, I coach for 1 hour, right? But before the coaching session, I spend 15 to 30 minutes in preparation. And after the coaching session, I spend about 30 minutes doing a post-session feedback, right? Which I type up and I send that to the client. So a 1 hour coaching session actually takes me 2 hours. So I have to allocate time for that. And I have to be realistic about it. So your time available, that's what you want to consider, right? And how much time you actually want to work. And this one pertains, Taslima, to what you mentioned about working 7 days a week, right? I don't want to work 7 days a week, right? Like Sundays is a boundary day. I don't work on Sundays. I don't work on public holidays. Whether the public holiday is on a Monday or Friday, I don't work that days because that's a boundary for me, right? So what I used to do in the past, for example, in my coaching work, clients would say to me that they cannot do a coaching session during the day because they're at work. So I used to coach at 8 and 9 o'clock in the evening, right? Because it was convenient for my clients, but it was inconvenient for me, right? Now, I love my work and it's not actually a job. I see what I do as a mission and I really enjoy it. So I kind of let that go where I used to work and coach people at night. But during this lockdown, I actually made a hard boundary that I will not coach after 5 p.m. And one of my clients that I used to coach in the evening, we notified her that it has changed. And she said, can't we make an exception? And we said, look, coaching will end at 5. And now I coach her from 4 to 5 on a Tuesday. So she made it work, right? So now at 5 o'clock, I'm done. So your time available, you have to be realistic about, and the time that you want to work, you have to make that decision, right? So this is how you structure your projects. And like I said, you have to be realistic on the time that you execute, and then the supplementary time as well. Your preparation time, traveling time, all of those things, your admin time, all of those things, right? Then the second thing you mentioned, Taslima, is about your routine of starting your day. There's different schools of thought on this. So Robin Sharma, who's an author, he, for example, has a book called The 5 a.m. Club, right? And he encourages people to start work at 5 a.m. Then you look at Jeff Bezos, who's the founder of Amazon, the richest person in the world currently. He wakes up naturally, he doesn't wake up with an alarm. He wakes up naturally and he has breakfast, he has a leisurely morning, he has breakfast with his family, etc. And he gets to work at maybe 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, right? So there's different ways you can do this and it's up to you. What I will mention for the people who are on this presentation who are Muslim, I believe that starting before the Fajr prayer, the morning prayer, is when you want to start your day, because there's spiritual significance to this. So I do a lot of work under the banner of faith and science. So I bring those two components together. And from that perspective, I would recommend starting your day early, and also ending your day early, right? So that you have enough rest. So you can, many of you will be aware, there's a lot of research currently available on sleep and how important that is, right? So this all ties together to make your day productive. Then the last thing you mentioned, Taslima, is about boundaries and about family. So especially if you're living with other family members, parents, etc., and there are visitors coming, etc., that can be a distraction to you. Now, what you need to do is, in a polite way, in a respectful way, to create boundaries where people do not disturb you, right? One tactic that you can use, if you work in a room where you can close the door, you can make it a boundary and communicate to people that if the door is closed, they should not disturb you, right? But so you might be in a meeting, you might be doing research work, etc. But during the rest of the day, when you're doing less focused work, you keep the door open so that they know that if they do have a question, they can speak to you, right? Another tactic which works really well, even whether at home or in a workplace, is to have headphones on, right? Like the way human psychology works, if someone thinks you're listening to something, they're prone to not disturb you, right? So if you have headphones on, that helps people understand that, look, you're you're busy and you're not available to speak. But these boundaries are important, and communication and over communication is what you need, so that people are, they feel that you're not offending them, so that you respect everyone. But you have to make these hard decisions, right? And sometimes with family, you want to actually spend time with them, but you have work to do. And this is where the trade-off comes in, which we spoke about earlier. So Taslima, I hope that's useful to you.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of all we have time for, everyone. So just to say thank you to Jamaaludeen Khan. I really benefited from this. I'm sure the students also benefited from it as well. And just to thank everybody else for attending. This talk is being live streamed onto YouTube, so you are welcome to go back and to watch it again. And I ask that you just keep on spreading the word about Teutonic. We are a maths organization providing free support to high school students, online support, which is especially important during this pandemic. And just thank you for attending. And we will be having some more talks soon. We will update you. You'll probably get some notifications from us, but remember to turn your notifications off. And we'll see you all soon. And I'm sure we can organize a follow-up session with Mr. Khan. I'm sure if there is demand for that, we could arrange for that. Okay, thank you, everyone. Enjoy your rest of your weekend.
Okay, from my side, thank you, Ilyas, and to Teutonic for all the work that you guys are doing. Thank you to everyone for joining in, for participating with asking questions. And I really hope that all of you have productive and happy lives, right? It's not only about productivity, but it's about being happy and fulfilled and about reaching your potential, right? So I can guarantee you that you have more potential than what you're executing today. And hopefully over time, you can see your potential fulfilled. So thank you, everyone. And yes, Ilyas, I'll be very happy to come back again to do a different topic with you guys.
Okay, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.